Uttar Pradesh did create expectations these elections. Voices for joblessness, price rise, livelihood seem to be cutting into the polarization the state has seen in the last several years. The farmer stir seemed to have given a boost to the opposition Gathbandhan of the Samajwadi Party and Rashtriya Lokdal right from the word go. Those who had been pitted against each other in communal violence 8 years ago came out to speak of harmony and brotherhood. Ruling party legislators were made to feel the farmers' anger and chased out of their constituencies. The polling moved from the west to the east, the last phase in particular drawing huge crowds for the opposition, unprecedented really. BSP's Mayawati could have gained too, but chose to stay away from the exuberance and was wiped out as a result. The Congress delved in under Priyanka Gandhi, but all its work went in vain, in the absence of an organization and the ability to mop up votes. The Dalits scattered, the Congress disappeared from the ballot boxes, the predictions for the other two in coalition went wrong. The BJP returned with fewer seats but a very comfortable majority. The Gathbandhan did not win but came in as a respectable opposition. So what now? Will the BJP continue with the politics of polarization and divide, or actually look at the development it has completely ignored? Or will the Samajwadi Party and RLD build on the support they have got? Or will the two young leaders go back indoors, leaving the state and the space to the BJP? Welcome to another edition of Off Limits. Our guest this week is Dr. Ashok Jahnavi Prasad. He is a scholar, a medical expert. He lives in Gorakhpur and he has been watching the elections very, very closely. We thought that this time we would get an analysis from a non-politician and get an idea of what the aftermath actually is and what it portends. So thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Prasad. And my first question, of course, is what do you make of the results?
Hello, Seema. Thanks for having me here. Well, the results were, some part of it was unexpected from the Gorakhpur perspective. I mean, there was absolutely no contest over here. So effectively, the chief minister had to win. But there were other bits. I mean, in dealing with my patients, I could sense the anger. And there was quite a lot of concern, but that really didn't get translated into seats. That really actually didn't get translated into seats there. And the results are somewhat disconcerting, but on the other hand, it's not to do, I mean, it's probably not the immediate results. I think I have been writing, maybe you might have followed some of my writings there. I have been very concerned with the entire electoral process that hasn't been enabling the citizens to perhaps elect their representatives properly. That's one of the difficulties, and that's one of the consistent issues that I have been pointing out.
So are you referring to the fact that there seemed to be no voters' names were missing, and then towards the end you had all those EVM controversies and the videos that were circulating? Are you talking about that?
That certainly is a concern, and that certainly should have been looked into. But going beyond that, I mean, looking beyond that, I mean, for the last 20 or 30 years, it's been very, very clear that people with just about 30% of votes are getting elected, that 30% of the popular mandate of the electorate are getting there. And well, I go back. I mean, there's a slight digression.
The entire change in the system of elections, right?
We do need that. We do need that.
Representation, etc.
Not exactly the proportional representation. I mean, if you go back to the Constituent Assembly debates, there was a time when the Irish statesman Eamon de Valera, he was in close touch with many Indian leaders.
Yeah.
And he had written to the president of the Constituent Assembly as well as Pandit Nehru, indicating that he did not feel that with the diverse population India had, first past the post system would function. They didn't adopt it in Ireland over there.
Right.
And that is exactly what's happening. I mean,
I am going to cut you there because I would love to discuss this, but we don't have that much time right now. And I really want to get your views on the election results, as it were. So now, I mean, the results are as they are. We can always go back and say it's because of this or because of that. But we do have the BJP back with full majority, about, albeit several seats less. And then we also have the Samajwadi that has risen from 47 into a fairly strong opposition this time. So the results have been mixed, right?
You could say that. You could say that from the numbers point of view. But in practical terms, I wouldn't say they are mixed. I mean, it's just a continuation of what used to be there, and the status quo, perhaps.
All right. So how do you see now the politics in UP playing out, given the fact that there was this huge concern that you just referred to about the COVID handling of the COVID deaths, about price rise, about unemployment, about joblessness, and all these issues which were really concerning the people, they don't seem to be reflected.
It didn't get translated into seats, that's certainly true. And there was, I mean, my patients were consistently alluding to that. In fact, the price rise, the unemployment. So
why did that not happen? Why didn't that happen? Is that because of the Hindu-Muslim divide that has been, because of hate politics? What has worked for the BJP?
Well, that certainly played a part. That certainly played a part because the state's more divided than I've ever known it to be in my lifetime. It's very much more divided, polarized, and very much more divided. But there was another factor because Akhilesh Yadav's track record in terms of law and order wasn't very good. Now, one could argue that even the BJP's track record is not terribly inspiring. But on the other hand, people were not left with much of a choice, really.
Right. So his track record, maybe not his that personally, but Mulayam Singh's or the Samajwadi Party's baggage he's being having to carry, right?
Well, he never made any sincere effort to shake it off. Probably he was not in a position to do so. But then again, I mean, one can argue that even the BJP's track record isn't terribly good. And perhaps, I mean, there were so many defections to Samajwadi Party who were honorably accommodated in the BJP. Some of them had a criminal record.
What is the reason? Is it deep and acute poverty and the inability to actually understand the larger picture because you're so steeped with the struggle for day-to-day life that this hate politics is working so well in UP?
Well, that offers a very, very easy solution, perhaps, and that is the way people perceive it, without realizing the long-term dangers of what it can lead to. That's certainly evident. Right. When you is so much inculcated, in fact, in the people who don't usually analyze the events, they are not in a position to analyze, perhaps. I mean, if you offer them quick fix solutions, I mean, that is what happened in 1932, in fact. That was the way it happened in 1932 in Germany.
We tried to understand Ireland through the Kashmir periscope at that time, etc., whether that solution would work. That's all a sort of a very different, we are a very different country. We are very complex. We're huge. We've got thousands of islands within us. And I know we should draw lessons from history. But if you come down to it, take our Dalits. The fact that you have a Dalit population, which is so huge in UP. Where did it go? How come it has got so influenced by the politics of hate? What do you think?
Well, the Dalit population used to vote en bloc. I mean, that was one population that used to vote en bloc in Uttar Pradesh, in fact. Most of the Dalits, and apart from a few isolated communities, they used to vote for BSP. This time, when BSP didn't stand a chance, it was very, very clear that the vote was going to disintegrate. BJP was able to tap into the votes, the BSP votes over there. And it didn't really, I mean, it certainly didn't really, the votes did not get transferred to Samajwadi Party as people might have expected. That didn't really happen. So
That's
that was
because
one
the
of the
BJP
factors.
was able to make inroads into the Dalit psyche, right?
And plus Mayawati, of course, I mean, even in Gorakhpur, she made a speech here. She delivered a speech exhorting the people never to vote for Akhilesh. Now, why that speech was actually delivered is another matter. Maybe some political calculations or something.
Yeah.
But that certainly did play a part.
And then we were looking in Western UP, and of course, RLD has picked up some seats and has picked up seats in, in more polarized areas like Muzaffarnagar, Shamli, Kairana, etc. But the farmer stir, as it were, everybody was expecting a sort of a debacle in Western UP in the first phase for the BJP, but that did not really happen. And while
Even
they
I
lost,
was
sorry?
Even I was expecting
Yeah.
a typical.
So how do
I
you
quite
explain
easy
that?
friends over there. But then again, there's quite a lot of anger in Muzaffarnagar over the riots. The Akhilesh had to carry a baggage there. That
No, but
particular
RLD
baggage.
has won there. RLD has won. Jayant has got the seats there. He's
Only a
got
few.
this.
Only a handful of seats. I mean, they should have done much, much better, really. I mean, the
Yes,
BJP
yes, of
should have been
course.
decimated.
Of
The
course.
BJP should have been decimated if farmers' struggle had been translated into the seats, in fact, that anger. And of course, BJP should have done much, the BJP should have been wiped out, almost wiped out over there. That didn't really happen.
And that didn't happen because of the baggage of Samajwadi Party, is it?
Very much so, very much so. And Jayant was, of course, he had a pact with Akhilesh there.
So he suffered because of that?
I think
Or
so.
he suffered because anyway, the RLD has lost considerable ground in that part of UP, which was once.
It probably had. It probably has lost a lot of ground, but on the other hand, even with that, I mean, even with the base that they have over there, they should have done much, much better.
And that didn't happen.
That didn't happen. No.
So what, and then there's the Dalit vote, there is the Muslim vote, of course, which consolidated, but was obviously everybody knew wouldn't be enough. But the Yadavs this time, in the last election, seem to have gone a lot to the BJP, but they've come back to the Samajwadi Party, right?
They have made a dent over there, but by and large, I would say, at least in Gorakhpur, well, I haven't come across a single Yadav who actually voted for BJP. They stuck to the Samajwadi Party.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Last elections they did, but this time they have come back to the Samajwadi Party. What happened to the other backwards? You're living in the land of other backwards. What happened to them? They remained with the BJP, or towards the eastern part of the state, they did vote for Samajwadi?
Well, I can comment on what I observed in Gorakhpur and the adjoining districts. I mean, it didn't seem that particularly Yadavs were particularly interested in voting for BJP, and that certainly did appear that way.
The other backward I'm talking about.
The other backwards voted for BJP. The Kurmis were there. They voted for BJP. Yeah. And there's always that. There's always that undercurrent of resentment as to why Yadavs are still being regarded as backward, because some of them are multimillionaires, really. I mean, many of them have done very well under the Mulayam government. So the other backward communities have always harbored some sort of a resentment against the Yadavs that way, as to why they are still being considered backward in the first place.
But the Patels, I mean, given the fact that the Apna Dal division, did that help? Because it did seem that the Patels were voting, at least part of them, for the Samajwadi, though the bigger chunk, of course, was with the BJP.
Only part of them really, but there were plenty of Kurmis, but who actually, at least in Gorakhpur, who voted for BJP.
Okay.
My own farm, my own village, in fact, I mean, there were plenty of Kurmis who actually voted for Narendra Modi. That is what they said. The Narendra Modi and Maharajji, they were not interested in the candidate over there. Narendra Modi and Maharajji. But
So
the
in
others,
this election, did you see a bigger play of Narendra Modi or of Adityanath?
towards the end, it was Narendra Modi, because he did make, Adityanath did make a few statements which were pretty bizarre. So I think, the language that was being used, it was appalling. It was completely appalling. I have never seen such language being used in the India election. Well, I was abroad for 32 years, but since my return, I've never seen, even before that, the language that was being used in this particular election. And that certainly didn't really endear Adityanath to many people. So effectively after that, I think he was asked to perhaps modulate his tone. And then, of course, Modi stayed here for a long time. Modi took over. So it was Modi's election. Towards the end, it was just Modi's election. After the third phase, it was Modi's election, I think.
Right. And he still has full charisma and popularity in UP.
I think Adityanath is about 5 times more polarizing than Modi.
Okay.
That is my understanding.
Right.
Modi, of course, started off being polarizing, but he has at least made some effort to appear. That may or may not be genuine for all we know, but he certainly made some effort to appear moderate. But Adityanath has made no effort.
So what do you see now, given the fact that the politics of polarization seems to have got a mandate? Is that going to be furthered, or is it going to be that there will be a sort of a let up on this and more on development?
Well, I sincerely hope people would see the polarization for what it is. People would begin to appreciate dangers, and certainly say enough is enough. Because there's some of the language that was being used. In fact, the election commission should have come down like a ton of bricks. Having said that, even Owaisi, of course, he didn't conduct himself on some of the language that Owaisi
But he never got any votes, so he's really nobody. He lost all the deposits. The Muslims rejected him. They showed a lot of good sense. He got less than 0.49% of the votes. But we are talking about the votes that did get, the percentage that did vote for polarization.
I was coming to that, that Owaisi didn't really make, he didn't make any impression over here. Yeah. He certainly didn't make any impression over here. But
he probably helped the ruling party.
He helped the ruling party, whether that was conscious, whether that was incidental, that is debatable. I don't particularly think that the BJP would like to be associated with Owaisi in any manner, so that may have been incidental. But on the other hand, I often wonder that Owaisi, whatever he is not a fool. He probably could appreciate that his entry into the foray was probably only going to benefit the BJP.
Right.
He was.
So in that sense, you've answered your own question.
That's right. That remains a mystery. It's not exactly a fool. I have known this man for a long time. In fact, he was called to the bar about 3 years after myself at Lincoln's Inn. That way. He's always been known to be, he analyzes everything with the precision that you might
have. In his own home, he's not seen as great. But I'm coming back to the fact that now you have a mandate for polarization in UP. Is that going to go further, or is there going to be some kind of look at joblessness and price rise and hunger, etc.?
Well, let's hope that it doesn't.
Logically, what do you expect this government to do? It's the same government. Logically.
I have my fears. I certainly have my fears.
Right. So we'll end this on that note. And thank you so much for giving us your time. And we'll be back soon next week with another edition of Off Limits. Thank you. BJP has won for a variety of reasons. It has won because its politics work. It has won because of a great organization, of hard work, of discipline, of going into the vote banks, of using the kind of formulae and concoctions that would work in luring voters away from whatever other opposition they saw and other political alternative that they were looking at in the state. It has won with fewer seats, but it has won with a very, very comfortable majority. After a long time now, UP will have a strong opposition, provided that Akhilesh Yadav and the Samajwadi Party and the Rashtriya Lok Dal and Jain Chaudhary all decide to give the state a strong opposition and do not see a defeat as the end of the story. So lots more to come. The state is a volatile state. We have to see whether Chief Minister Adityanath is going to look on the mandate to further the politics of divisiveness, or is he going to get a message and read a message in the fact that he got fewer seats and look at development, joblessness, hunger, price rise as the real issues to take UP forward. More later. Thank you so much.